Why the short season theory does not fit the biblical timeline. A Christian argument from Revelation, Genesis, Jude, 2 Peter, and the ancient Watcher tradition. Everyone keeps saying we're in the short season, but nobody is checking the math. When you do, it changes everything. Are we really living in the short season after the millennium? Or has the timeline been misunderstood entirely? Because when you actually do the math, it creates a contradiction most people have never noticed. The claim that we are already living in the short season after the millennium may sound compelling at first, but when the timeline is examined carefully, it creates serious biblical and chronological problems. Revelation 20 gives a clear order. Satan is bound. The 1,000-year reign occurs. Then Satan is released for a short season. John writes, "And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. He then explains the purpose of that binding, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. Only after the 1,000 years does John say, after that he must be loosed a little season. The sequence is unmistakable. Binding first, millennium second, short season third. This order matters because some argue that the millennium began around AD 70, after the destruction of Jerusalem. But if the millennium began in AD 70 and lasted a literal 1,000 years, then it would have ended around AD 1070. The calculation is simple. 70 plus 1000 equals 1070. That would mean the short season began around AD 1070. If so, then by 2026 the little season has already lasted about 956 years. That is nearly another millennium. Calling that a little season is difficult to reconcile with the language of Revelation 20. Some shift the beginning of the short season into the 1700s, but that creates another problem. If the millennium began in AD 70, then the 1,000 years do not end in the 1700s. They end around AD 1070. To push the short season into the 1700s requires adding roughly 600 extra years to the millennium. But Revelation repeatedly calls it 1,000 years. If the 1,000 years are being used to build a timeline, then the number cannot be treated literally when convenient and stretched when inconvenient. The problem becomes even sharper when the ancient Watcher tradition is included. The Bible itself speaks of angels who sinned and were placed in confinement. Peter writes, "God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment." Jude says the same, "The angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day." Jude then connects this rebellion with sexual transgression by comparing it to Sodom and Gomorrah, saying they went after strange flesh. This fits the ancient interpretation of Genesis 6, where the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose, and where the Nephilim or giants appear in connection with that rebellion. The book of Enoch expands this Watcher tradition. It says the rebellious Watchers were to be bound beneath the earth, bind them fast for 70 generations in the valleys of the earth, till the day of their judgment and of their consummation. If we use 40 years as a biblical generation, drawn from the wilderness pattern where Israel wandered 40 years until that generation passed away, then 70 generations equals 2,800 years. The calculation is straightforward. 70 times 40 equals 2,800 years. Now apply that to the proposed ancient chronology. If the Watchers were bound around 4,500 years before 2026, that places their binding around 2,475 BC. If they were bound for 70 generations, or 2,800 years, then moving forward from about 2,475 BC lands near AD 326. In other words, under this framework, the Watchers would have been released around AD 326. That creates a major contradiction for the AD 70 millennium theory. If the millennium began in AD 70 and continued until AD 1070, But the Watchers were released around AD 326. Then fallen angels were released during the supposed millennium. That does not fit Revelation 20. The millennium is not presented as an age in which Satan is bound while other rebellious heavenly powers are released from beneath the earth to corrupt mankind. Revelation says Satan is bound that he should deceive the nations no more. The short season comes only after the 1,000 years are finished. The biblical picture of the millennium is not one of hidden corruption, released angels, worldwide deception, and spiritual darkness. Isaiah describes a future reign of righteousness and peace. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and they shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord. Revelation describes those who reign with Christ for 1,000 years and says, they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. That is not a description of the medieval world, religious empire, persecution, war, plague, corruption, and deception. It is a description of a future reign of Christ and the restraint of satanic deception. Therefore, the cleaner conclusion is this: we are not living in the short season after the millennium. We are living in the final period before the millennium, when evil is being exposed, deception is increasing, and truth is also being brought to light. Daniel was told that in the time of the end many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Jesus said that before his coming there would be wars and rumors of wars, false prophets, deception, lawlessness, and global distress. Paul warned that before the day of Christ there would come a falling away first, and the revealing of that man of sin. Those descriptions fit a pre-millennial crisis, not a post-millennial short season after a completed reign of Christ. The timeline refutes the short season theory. If the millennium began in AD 70, it ended around AD 1070. If the short season began then, it has lasted nearly 1,000 years. If someone moves it to the 1700s, they abandon the 1,000-year calculation. And if the Watchers were released around AD 326 according to the 70-generation Enoch calculation, then their release falls inside the supposed millennium, which contradicts the biblical meaning of the millennium itself. A millennium filled with released fallen angels, global deception, spiritual darkness, and institutional corruption is not the millennium described in Revelation 20 and Isaiah 11. The better reading is that the millennium has not yet begun. Satan has not yet been bound so that he can deceive the nations no more. Christ has not yet reigned over the earth in the fullness described by the prophets. The earth has not yet been filled with the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. Therefore, we are not in the short season after the millennium. We are in the troubled season before the millennium, when God is exposing darkness, increasing knowledge, warning the nations, and preparing the world for the reign of Jesus Christ. If the timeline doesn't actually support the idea that we're in the short season, then where do you think we really are in prophecy right now? If this timeline is accurate, does it change your view of end times prophecy, or do you think something in this calculation is wrong? Footnotes 1. Revelation 20, 2-3, KJV, BibleGateway.com 2. Revelation 20, 2-7, KJV, BibleGateway.com 3. 2 Peter 2, 4, KJV, BibleGateway.com 4. Jude 1, 6-7, KJV, BibleGateway.com 5. Genesis 6, 1-4, KJV, BibleGateway.com 6. 1 Enoch 10:12, R. H. Charles Translation, Excel.org 7. Numbers 14:33-34, KJV, BibleGateway.com 8. Isaiah 11, 6-9, KJV, BibleGateway.com 9. Daniel 12, 4, KJV, BibleGateway.com 10. Matthew 24, 6-12, KJV, BibleGateway.com 11. 2 Thessalonians 2, 3, KJV, BibleGateway.com.